This is a overview to Chapter 4 in the Openstax textbook. Again, this is the second edition, and Chapter 4 covers states of consciousness. Actually, it looks like the paragraph called, or the chapter is called State of Consciousness. I've noticed, at least from the first edition of this textbook, this is the chapter that they throw all the odds and ends of psychology into, things that don't have maybe enough of a legacy in the history of psychology to merit their own chapter. So there's a little bit about sleep, dreaming, drugs, altered states of consciousness, which of course makes sense. And I think like higher states of consciousness and like meditation, some of the religious practices or spiritual practices that have been linked with psychological well-being. So I honestly think that rather than consciousness, which is a significant 19th century question that got psychology started, and a pretty big late 20th century question, isn't the main focus of this chapter, but more these odds and ends, the miscellany of psychology. So we've got a definition here on this first slide. What is consciousness? I am an existential phenomenologist, and so when I define consciousness, it is not something that we have, it's something that we are. Humans are being consciousness. But it's really difficult to introduce a concept that way because it transforms the way you even think of who or what you are. So I'm just going to stick with the way it's defined here in this textbook. Consciousness deals with our awareness of our environment. We entertain lights and images and people and sounds and all these perceptions. We interpret them and make sense of them. So that all of that is sort of called conscious awareness. And so being unconscious of something is having some sort of, in Freudian theory, having like a connection to it. Maybe it influences us, but we're not aware of it. It's not on our mind. And so it may impact us, but we don't recognize that impact directly, even though we might express it. Second term here, wakefulness. Obviously being awake. When we're sleeping, we don't have conscious awareness the way that we have when we are awake. And so the ability to like listen to my voice and even like think about what you want to have for dinner, those are both conscious acts. But when we're sleeping, we might have all of these thoughts that manifest as dreams, but we're not sort of active the same way as we are when we're awake. So we'll look at sleep, we'll look at states of consciousness and how those are impacted by drugs, and then a bunch of other kind of grab bag stuff. Looks like there's 36 slides, and I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. Scientists have recognized that there are certain biological rhythms that dictate our sleeping and wakefulness cycle, as well as our attention and arousal levels and so on. One of those primary rhythms is the circadian rhythm, and it's linked with sunshine and the length of a normal working day as dictated by the sun movement. So when the sun rises, there's this natural inclination to like become more aroused, become more awake, more aware and attentive. As the sun goes down, it gets dark. We have this natural inclination to slow down. Parasympathetic activity starts, and we become sleepy. And that happens to be about like I think a 23.8 hour cycle, which happens to line up perfectly with the rotation of the Earth. What controls our biological rhythm? Looks like there is some evidence that the hypothalamus, which is responsible for releasing adrenaline, or at least releasing the signal to release adrenaline, that gets our fight or flight activity going, but also initiates the rest and sleep cycle. Oh, here's a look at the body change just looking at temperature. So as we become sleepy, our body temperature goes down. So the activity in our body, the cells, decreases and the body temperature drops. And then as we wake up, the body temperature increases. And so it does vary throughout the day. And so when we're really tired, maybe our body temperature goes down to about 97.5. When we're like wide awake and like really active, it jumps up quite a bit higher. Now it looks like in here we've got the biggest point occurring probably right at about sleep. And so that might be when you first fall asleep, you might descend through the stages of sleep and then like spend time in REM sleep, or maybe this is deep sleep here where the body is like actively recovering. Now this is an area of the brain that I'm not familiar with, so this was actually a surprise to me. I never learned about the suprachiasmatic nucleus, but evidently it's this little node in the midbrain right in front of the hypothalamus and above the pituitary gland, and it is responsible for regulating, or it's been found to be responsible for regulating this circadian rhythm. So the body temperature changes, the awareness and arousal changes throughout the day. I was unfamiliar with that. Have you ever tried melatonin? So you can get this over-the-counter or maybe off-the-shelf medication. It's something that your body naturally produces, but when melatonin is released, and sunshine can help kind of increase the amount of sunshine you get during the day can increase the amount of melatonin you get when you enter darkness. So that kind of initiates this natural bodily process. So if you take melatonin, it's kind of the same as the sun going real low. Sleep regulation. Definition here: the brain's control of switching between sleep and wakefulness, as well as coordinating the cycle with the outside world. Notice how if you're really stressed out, like you are studying for an exam, or you've got like practice and then like a serious family emergency, all of these things contribute to your arousal level. Your stress levels can be really high. And if we go back and we see the SCN right here and the hypothalamus, which is right next to it, they're working in tandem. And so the hypothalamus will be there to regulate bodily responses to stress. And if that's like super active, then the suprachiasmatic nucleus won't be as impactful in regulating sleep. So you might find yourself going to bed, falling asleep, and then being wide awake for 3 hours because these are part of a system that interact with each other. There are a couple of documented, or there's consensus about certain problems with sleep. Now, what's the word? Insomnia is a subjective sense that you're not getting enough sleep at night. There's no like clear or objective definition. It can't be tested in a laboratory because you might be getting 8 hours of sleep yet still feel like you're not getting quality sleep. So there are some things that have been associated with difficulty sleeping. One of those is traveling a long distance between time zones. So I live in the Eastern time zone in the United States. If I were to fly to San Francisco, where my sister lives, I would fly over maybe 3 or 4 time zones. I forget exactly. So that would mean right now it is 12:50. For my sister, it's closer to 9:50. So she may just be getting going, whereas I've been awake for half of the day for me. So if I went to San Francisco, I'd be ready to go to bed by 5 p.m. their time. But I have to stay up until 10 or 11 or whenever they're going to go to bed. And I would get really tired, even though the sun's still up. And so that adjustment is jet lag. If I'm used to getting up or going to work at 10 or 11 like I do, and then suddenly I have to get up and go to work at 6, I would not be mentally prepared because I'm in this habit of like kind of slowly getting ready to think and be at work at 11, and now I'm getting ready to be at work at 6. So there would be a pretty significant shift I'd have to go through. I'd have trouble going to sleep early at first, and then I'd be so tired during the day and so on. So we can help manipulate our ability to sleep by getting into the habit, by staying away from like bright lights before we go to sleep. There's a whole area of psychology dedicated to sleep hygiene, and that just means you're creating environmental conditions that will support your ability to sleep through the night. I definitely recommend looking into that if you struggle to sleep through the night or get to sleep at night. So what happens if you don't get enough sleep? If you're a college student, chances are you do not get enough sleep at night. You should be getting at least 8 hours on average, 7 to 8. Most students get around 4.5 to 6, as I've found, based on just me having conversations with them. So that may not have initial problems, but over time, sleep debt accumulates. So your body isn't having enough time to recover. So this might be just your body breaks down during the day. Even if you're not exercising or working out, your attention sort of deteriorates throughout the day and you need to like recharge. But then like just your physiology needs to recharge overnight. And if it doesn't recharge back to 100%, maybe it's 95% the first night, and the next night 90, then 85. Well, pretty soon you're like recharging only to about 60 or 40 or 30. It adds up, and it takes a long time to recover. You can't make it all back up in one night. And if you get 6 hours of sleep a night for a month, you can't sleep for a whole day like that. You can't make up for it that way. So here's a whole bunch of consequences with having sleep debt. So I'll let you take a look at that. As we get older, our need for sleep changes, and so it's the highest when we're infants. Obviously, the body is changing rapidly, growing twice the body length and weight in like a few months, and so that's a lot of growth, and all that growth takes energy, and the expenditure of all that energy requires a lot more rest. I am now in this bracket, and it says I need 7 to 9 hours, but I may need 6 to 10 hours. Right now I'm in about the 8-hour range. I definitely have time to sleep as much as I need to, so I'm never like repeatedly getting too little sleep, and it averages out to about 8 hours for me. But if I'm training a lot for a marathon, for example, I might need 10 hours. I generally don't need more than 10 hours. If I do need more than 10, then something's probably wrong. Maybe I'm sick. But you, if you're in college, may be in this area where you need 6 to 10 to 11 hours. Eventually, though, I may only need 5 hours of sleep at night. What is sleep? Well, obviously, it's a period of bodily rest when we are no longer consciously aware, and is associated with these hormones. Human growth hormone, that's an important one if you are training or exercising a lot, because it stimulates bodily growth and bodily repair, muscular repair, bone repair, and so on. I think bone repair, I'm not sure. Here are all the areas of your brain that are involved with sleep. The pituitary gland, I would say, well, other than the SCN, which is new to me, the pituitary gland is super important because of its release of hormones. So all those hormones that help us feel tired or help us wake back up obviously would be related. The hypothalamus is what stimulates the pituitary gland to release those hormones. Pineal gland is responsible, I think, for bodily growth, and so that's, of course, an important thing that's happening while we're sleeping and recovery. The pons, off the top of my head, I don't remember exactly, but that came up in the Chapter 3 Biological Psychology. You can take a look at what it might be doing at night. Why do we sleep? It'd be interesting to not sleep for a week and just see what happens. My guess is you would collapse of fatigue, and so your body would be saying, we need this. So obviously, it does something essential for us, even if it may sometimes seem like a waste of time. I haven't felt that way maybe since middle school. It benefits all sorts of things, such as our thinking and stress levels, body weight. That's interesting. When we sleep, we're releasing brainwaves, so we can do a test while you're sleeping to determine what stage of sleep you're in. So we've got a couple stages here. So let me lean into the camera. REM sleep, rapid eye movement, that is when we are dreaming. It is the most restful sleep that we get, and so usually when you're sleeping in, it's primarily REM sleep because we've already gotten all the other sleep that we need, a stage of sleep that we need. And so if we take a nap, just a brief nap, it's usually like a little bit of REM sleep and then we're done. But we feel really recharged from that, even if it's a tiny bit of sleep. Stage 4, which isn't listed here, which is interesting, is the deepest, heaviest sleep, and maybe that's what stage 3 non-REM. By the way, REM only happens during the REM period, and so all these other ones are non-REM. And so stage 3, I guess here, maybe stage 4 was removed over the past few years for not being sufficiently different from stage 3, perhaps. And so you see these like really deep waves, and so we've got the delta waves there. Make sure that's right. Doesn't say specifically. Oh, there's the stage 4. Okay. So stage 1, the transitional phase occurring between wakefulness and sleep. So as you start to fall asleep, maybe you feel yourself drifting off even though you're still kind of aware. That's when you have alpha waves. Stage 2, your body's in deep relaxation. You start releasing theta waves, and we see these sleep spindles, and so that's what a spindle looks like, and K complexes. Very high amplitude pattern of brain activity. I can't tell you off the top of my head why either of those two things are important, but on an EEG machine, they show up. In stage 3 and 4, that's when we have slow wave sleep, and that's these big, spread out brain waves. And that's if you look at body temperature, I think you would see the absolute lowest here. Heart rate slows down. Lowest heart rate you'll record all day. During rapid eye movement, that's when you're dreaming. So muscle paralysis, you won't have control over your muscles. You may move around or talk, but you won't be under conscious control of that. In a brainwave machine, look at, it would almost appear that you are awake, but of course you're not conscious or aware. Therefore, it is this unique sleep state. Here is what happens when you sleep at night. So you're awake, you go to sleep, and then really quickly you drop down into stage, it says 4 or 3 here, but I've always understood that down here to be 4. So you spend a lot of time there. That's like the deepest, most restorative sleep, even though it's not the most restful. So you might go to sleep and then like boom, you're out, totally unaware of everything. That's your stage 4. Here it looks like it's listed as stage 3, so keep that in mind. Then you like kind of fall out of it, and then if you need more, you go back. If you've missed sleep a lot, you'll get a lot of stage 4 sleep, big old chunks of it. If you've been getting plenty of sleep, you might spend only a tiny bit of time in that stage and spend most of your time up here in REM sleep. All right, now dreams. When you sleep, you may have had these experiences of having memories or thoughts, or almost like you were part of a movie where something crazy happened or something interesting happened or scary happened or fun happened, and then you wake up and you're like, oh, that didn't actually happen. Well, that's a dream. Freud and Jung both had their own hypotheses about what dreams were. I prefer Fritz Perls's analysis of dreams, and I've written a book chapter and a couple of videos about how to analyze your dreams that way, but Carl Jung and Freud both had their own approach to interpreting what dreams meant. I'm not going to go into that here, but you can take a look. Insomnia, I already mentioned. Here are some possible reasons why you'd have trouble sleeping or feeling restful with sleep, and there are a couple of treatment modalities for what you might be able to do to solve it. Parasomnia. Unwanted motor or behavioral experiences throughout the sleep cycle. My wife talks a lot in her sleep, and that surprised me when we first started sleeping together. I thought she was awake and I would try to have a conversation with her, but she was not conscious, and it was very bizarre the things that she would say. It hasn't been a problem for us. It doesn't upset our dogs. But if it did, then perhaps we would call this a parasomnia and seek some sort of treatment. Sleepwalking has been recorded, so my wife does not sleepwalk. She sleep talks and moves around in bed, but she does not leave the bed. It could be dangerous, however, if someone has a tendency to get up and walk around, maybe eat, maybe drive. I've heard some pretty bizarre stories that I'm not going to repeat because I doubt their reliability. Having dreams that are so awful that you wake up, night terrors. Perhaps we could analyze what those mean, why they happen. Difficulty sleeping because of discomfort in your legs. I've noticed that with like lots of training, like running training, but definitely in adolescents who are going through growth spurts. Sleep apnea is something that affects people as they age, and particularly when they are overweight or have other sinus issues, but they can't breathe, and so they start to suffocate, and then they wake up, and that can interfere with their sleep, but it's also dangerous, and so they wear these CPAP machines. There's two types. So I mentioned the obstructive sleep apnea, but apparently there can be a problem with your nervous system, and that is terrifying. And this is a horribly sad slide. Sudden infant death syndrome. So infants can sometimes spontaneously die while they're sleeping. Sudden infant death syndrome, with or without strangling themselves like with a blanket. I don't know a lot about SIDS, so perhaps the textbook goes into more detail, but it is something to be concerned about with very young infants. Narcolepsy is the opposite of insomnia. Narcoleptics fall asleep without trying to, and so maybe they're like in the middle of a conversation and they fall asleep. Ooh, a picture of the old DSM. So now we're getting into drugs. So we're again kind of grab bag miscellaneous topics here. Drugs can change our state of consciousness, and we can develop a problem with drugs, whether it's alcohol or cocaine or even like marijuana, heroin, other opiates. We can develop a need for them. I'm drinking coffee. Coffee is a drug, and I have a physiological dependence on it. When I wake up in the morning, I have a very low arousal level and trouble like focusing or being interested in anything, and a little bit of coffee is a stimulant that kind of stimulates my nervous system and increases my awareness and focus. And I've developed a tolerance for it, so I can drink more coffee now than I used to be able to. And I need more of it to kind of get the same stimulant effect. But the same is true for alcohol, alcoholics, people who take opiates for pain relief, people who take drugs for the rush that they provide. So you develop a dependence on it and a tolerance of it so that you need more of it. And then when you finally get rid of the drug, you sometimes have these withdrawal symptoms as your body adapts to not having this drug that's needed. When I don't drink coffee, I get headaches, and so it's because the the blood passageways, the veins and arteries in my cerebral cortex shrink, and so they need to be expanded, and so I need to take like a anti-inflammatory drug to prevent that from happening. All right, so there are different categories of drugs. You've got depressants, such as alcohol. A lot of people think that THC is a depressant, but actually it's a stimulant because it's listed right here in between all of them. It seems like a depressant because it often makes people sleepy, but really that's just because it makes your eyelids feel heavy, and it has more to do with the reduction in uh, moisture in the face, in the head, and so like it makes you hungry too because all the saliva kind of evacuates your mouth, um, and it turns off your frontal cortex. So you can't be thinking about and worrying about things, and so it's like you can just kind of relax, but actually your heart rate has increased, your blood pressure has increased, and so in those ways, physiologically it's a stimulant, psychologically it's a depressant. That's why it's there in the middle. Antipsychotics, and like Halidol and Risperdal, are for schizophrenia, and honestly, I'm not sure exactly how those work and how that's associated with schizophrenic type symptoms, but it's been shown to reduce the severity of them. Down here we've got hallucinogens, which a hallucination is like a vision or an audition that is not real, and so it might be seeing things that aren't there or hearing things that aren't there. So people like taking LSD and psilocybin because it alters consciousness and what you're aware of. The stimulant, of course, is like increasing your arousal. A depressant decreases your arousal. So there's a nice little table of everything that I just said, along with lists of what those might be and what they do. Oh, and I always do this. There's detailed slides with everything that I just went through. Well, I guess just depressants. Oh, and there's the other ones. All right, so here in depressants, I'm guessing, is the GABA-gated chloride channel. So GABA is talking about a neurotransmitter and its role in depressants or depression. And we've got stimulants, and there we go. Dopamine is a stimulant. Caffeine is a stimulant. Nicotine is also a stimulant. So smoking cigarettes, drinking coffee, 2 stimulants. Opioids are depressants. Hallucinogen. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, morphine, heroin, those are depressants. There's the look at. That's like the most fun slide. Apparently, hallucinogens are the most fun according to this textbook. And some examples of what those are. So we've got past drugs. Now we're on to other altered states of consciousness. So hypnosis, popular with like show psychology or entertainment psychology. Hypnosis is just the art of suggestion. So getting somebody in a relaxed state where they are likely to respond to your suggestions. So someone is hypnotized when they will do whatever you tell them to do, and they're willing to do that. And maybe they're kind of loosely aware of their own agency and control. Does it work? Well, sure. Does it work for everyone? No. Can it be used to solve psychological disorders? Sure, if you're willing to sort of let go of your own agency and give that to someone else, and then they kind of control what you do, and that might be like letting go of responsibility. It was popular in like the 19th century as like a treatment. Some key figures did it up until like maybe the 60s. I'm sure there are a few people who do it still today, but it's not really used. Or the consensus is that hypnotism isn't a very good way or effective way to do therapy. Meditation goes back centuries, it goes back millennia in Eastern and South Asian spiritual disciplines, contemplative disciplines. Meditation, like this person here is doing, is the process of sort of watching your thoughts without being the one watching them. It's like letting go of this idea that you are a self and you're in control of things, and everything that seems like you're controlling is actually just kind of happening to you, not through you or by you. And so it's kind of that letting go. This mindfulness is being aware of things without feeling the need to control them or influence them or change them, manipulate them or judge them. Oh, and I've made it to the end. Disappointing that there's only one slide on that, but like 10 slides on drugs. That would be the most interesting part of this whole chapter that I would encourage you to focus on to practice those things. But you may also like drink coffee and like record how it makes you feel, and if you're of age, drink alcohol and like record how it makes you feel, and actually see the bodily changes. Things are happening that maybe you're not entirely aware of. If you're interested in dreams, keep a dream journal. Start doing that now, and you can actually increase how much of your dreams you remember by getting into the practice of recording them, and there are a whole bunch of methods of their analysis.